less about the crime. No one looks behind the curtain, and no one questions why. The only time we got is right about now. I cross my heart, I take the vow, I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
If you're in Vancouver, the end could be a little sooner than you think. We were following the crate last week about that mysterious tip we got from California about some person or persons putting a suspicious crate on the Norwegian Star, and the Norwegian Star, for some strange reason, canceled its contract with 800 suites rented out for the Olympics at probably some god-awful high price, and left all those people stranded for pretty much no reason at all, so it could go into dry dock to get its barnacles scraped or whatever. And that seemed rather unusual to us, and something that we thought we should follow very, very closely. So all week we've been monitoring all the patterns of paths of ships in and around the greater Vancouver area, playing the shell game to see who came in contact with Norwegian Star and where they went, and we'll bring that up in the body of the show and show you what we found. And, maybe we're still waiting for that crate to appear, and maybe they can't use it to the degree they had intended on, because a lot of people have put together some good videos on what they expect in a false flag operation in Vancouver to be, have done a very good job in doing so, and I watched them last week with Agent 99, and I must say I was just truly shocked at the level of insecurity that we're getting for $900 million. Specifically, what's most shocking is the theft of uniforms that had occurred. Just amateurish. The fence at the airport has holes in it that you could walk through. Amateurish. It's just absolutely disgusting. But probably the most shocking thing that I didn't hear, because that was probably more in the Vancouver news than, Ontario news, was the fact that in Washington State, all the alphabet soup agencies are ready to move and invade Canada. So Border Patrol, Homeland Security, the FBI, and God only knows what else. We all had a big planning session and a big command center all set up with the state police, the sheriff's departments, and God only knows what else, the U.S. Coast Guard, the military, and they had a plan in place to come across the border as required. When you factor that in with the biological warfare training that was done at Minnow Air Force Base and this mysterious crate, we have to really wonder. Anyway, as it stands right now, the USS Shoup, guided missile destroyer 86, is cruising off Vancouver Island just outside of the border, if there is one. And we have HMCS Edmonton pulling into port, probably to refuel or something. It's been on station. HMCS Whitehorse seems to be taking up the slack. It's just a mine layer, so hardly a great naval vessel. And HMCS Brandon, we have two Coast Guard ships in and around the greater Victoria area, the Wilfrid Laurier and the W.E. Ricker. Of course, we don't arm our Coast Guard ships. So one of the big things that came across the email blasts we got at the station as well, something that just drives someone insane if you have any sort of a conscience. The purveyor of the information didn't really want us to follow up on it as of yet, but just the nature and quality of the concern is something that I think we have to bring to people's attention. And I always thought that the police could go low, really, really low, and we've noticed that in the greater Toronto area with the theft of drug dealers' money and a lot of other improprieties that have been going on. But sometimes you wonder, just how low can you go? And then you get an email like that, and it just lets you know how low you can go. They steal from the dead. So someone dies, they don't notify the next of kin, they have assets, somehow those assets go missing. Years later, the next of kin maybe or maybe not find out. That's how low they can go in Dalton McGuinty's Ontario. But that's okay, because if they ever catch somebody, we hear from our sources last week that they watched the girl shower in the Vanier Institute and forcibly inoculate them with God only knows what. And nobody cares, because they're the people who are on the lower end of the scale, perhaps. But we do care here, and that's what makes us a cut above any other radio. I know my partner in crime, Timmy, who has to work hard to support his family and can't participate right at this time, so we do another show in New York City from time to time. But, you know, he was very disappointed that only Richard Serrett was nominated for an honorary degree at York University and not myself, because I do the kind of news where nobody else does kinds of news like that, like follow the anti-terror police when they're following the Toronto terrorists, all cammed up and blacked out, crawling on the grass, watching where they go, what they do, and seeing who's smuggling explosives into the city of Toronto. Things like exposing why that big flame happened in the north end of Toronto and why there's a weapons of mass destruction facility under old CFB Downsview, and maybe that had a lot to do with Sunrise Petroleum blowing up in the middle of the night. And faculty there telling me that their last mistake almost caused them to evacuate the whole city of Toronto. But you see, most other media aren't going to do that because there's consequences, and for me that consequence was a transport truck put across the highway just to make sure I don't do that again. But the big guy was on my side. So, sucks to be them. We're at it still. One of the other things you can say about that when it comes to awards or anything like that, probably the greatest award you're ever going to get is just comes out of the mouths of babes. So from my own personal perspective, you know, I sincerely remember and will never forget when a newly adopted young person to Canada who's in a single parent situation came up to me and sincerely asked, "Will you be my father?" That was probably the greatest award any human being can ever get, and that's one that can make a grown man cry, because out of the mouths of babes comes the truth, the perception of what's good and what's not, what's true and what is false. And that little babe put a little sticky heart on my thermos on Valentine's Day and baked me a cake. And it would be an honor to be the father to a child like that, because that's the greatest award you can get. Family doesn't come by choice, it comes by circumstance. When you pick someone to be your father, then that's a great honor. And that's probably the greatest honor I'll ever have, and I don't need a honorary degree or anything else from anywhere else, because nothing can come close. Speaking of close, we can't get close to the Olympic cauldron for some strange reason. It's supposed to be off limits. It's put behind Stephen Harper's big security fence. Can you imagine that? So what we have is a great parody by CTV, because they brought that up. I guess they brought that up because some nefarious forces burned down their television studios in Ottawa, and they lost a good portion of their historical perspective on Canada, which is quite a shame. And they've been rattling the cage a little bit, but kind of remember when I was tailing those Toronto terrorist guys way back when, one of my friends was a producer at W5. That's on the CTV banner head as well. Unfortunately, we couldn't hook up that night for a very unfortunate reason, or I could have had a much bigger thing behind me at the time. Anyway, if we can zoom in on the screen there, Blue, let's look at how fascism used to work in the past here. We had no problem having these Olympic cauldrons in the past. This is the 1936 Winter Olympics in Nazi Germany. Hitler was very smart. He just put that cauldron way up high on like something like a water tower, so you could see it and photograph it. It's just you couldn't touch that puppy. And then in the Summer Olympics, of course, they come in to light the Olympic flame, so they just have a wall of brown shirts and black shirts. So you really can't get near the flame or anything like that. You have a human wall that blocks things out. And then we see our version today. That's a little tiny picture there, but you see this big fence blocking the cauldron, and people looking in through the fence just wondering why all the security around something like that. Why would that be possibly necessary?